Hello everyone, Max here with Fiction Rant, bringing you part 7 of my series discussing the Star Wars vs. Battlestar Galactica contest. This part will discuss the tactics of each faction. As a reminder from part 1, this is a comparison of the Star Wars Imperial Empire, circa the Battle of Endor, versus the 12 colonies of Kobol, prior to them getting nuked into oblivion, and in a parallel comparison versus the Cylons, also immediately prior to nuking the 12 colonies of Kobol into oblivion. Starting again with the Imperials, this is probably the weakest element of the Imperial arsenal. In short, with a couple exceptions, their tactics suck. Their commanders are generally incompetent, and even the Emperor, political genius that he was a combat tactics moron who let pride interfere with what should have been a straightforward and simple victory. Several times throughout the original trilogy, we get to see Imperial incompetence on display. In Empire Strikes Back, we get to see multiple examples, starting with Admiral Ozzel at the beginning of the film jumping Vader's fleet close enough to Hoth that the rebels were able to easily detect the energy surge from the fleet exiting hyperspace, a stupid decision that gets him choked to death by Vader. Later in the same film, while trying to chase down the Millennium Falcon, a trio of Star Destroyers apparently forgot that tractor beams exist, so they attempt a pincer maneuver, forgetting that space is three-dimensional, so they get outmaneuvered by the brilliant decision by Han Solo to fly downward. All three then proceed to ram each other, slowing their ability even further to pursue the Falcon, even more than their own competence was already doing. In A New Hope, the first Death Star was destroyed by a handful of fighters, when they could have just met the attack with literally thousands of TIE fighters instead of just Vader and his two wingmen. Finally, in Return of the Jedi, instead of absolutely shredding the Rebel fleet during their attack on the second Death Star, the Emperor ordered his entire fleet of Star Destroyers to not engage the Rebel fleet, so he could play with his new toy and blow up ships using the Death Star super laser. This meant that thanks to the quick thinking of Lando, those Star Destroyers basically got converted into extremely costly terrain for the rebels to hide behind, while they inflicted staggering losses upon the Imperial fleet, and ultimately destroyed the Death Star 2 as well, with some help from the local Ewoks, who the Empire should have done a better job of keeping away from their installations, such as, by cutting down all the trees around their facilities, or just having standing orders to shoot the oversized teddy bears on sight. The only example of a brilliant tactician in the Empire is Thrawn, who, in my opinion, basically just serves to highlight just how incompetent everybody else really is. Yeah, he's a brilliant commander who uses his knowledge of his opponents to anticipate their actions and destroy them, though apparently the Ahsoka show tries to demonstrate that he doesn't actually do that. I'll go by the books on this one. I'm not going to try to claim that he's not a brilliant commander. However, in the Thrawn books, there's multiple examples of him doing basic things that are considered basically magical by his fellow officers. My favorite example of this was while Thrawn was still a lieutenant and his ship was dealing with a swarm of repurposed vulture droids left over from the Clone Wars that a warlord had purchased. He knew that there were two basic modes of operations for the droids. If they were on their own, they'd be uncoordinated and hyper-aggressive, making them relatively easy targets. If they were being commanded by a command facility, they'd be well-coordinated and deadly. They were having trouble during the engagement, so Thrawn just paid attention to when the droids would stop being so well-coordinated and became more aggressive while flying around, and used that to triangulate the location of the transmitter coordinating the swarm. He brought this information to his commanding officer, who proceeded to dismiss his information because there was no possible way he could have figured that out. So really what Thrawn did, which was so mystical, was basic triangulation based on pretty obviously different behavior patterns. This was a great move on his part, but not exactly a huge stretch. I mean, GPS uses triangulation to help you navigate all the time. But no, to the Imperials, sensor triangulation is insanely and nearly unattainably brilliant. So yeah, Thrawn is a great commander. Basically everybody else in the Imperial Navy is an idiot. On to the 12 colonies. I don't honestly have that much to say about them, since their tactics pretty much always make sense without blowing me away with their brilliance. Their ship-to-ship tactics are very by the book. Put up a flak shield to intercept fighters and missiles, deploy fighters to intercept enemy fighters, and then try to get close enough to your enemy so you can pummel them to death with your giant guns. In the series, it's pretty apparent that Cylon base stars can't actually contend with base stars in straight-up fights, and if it weren't for the software exploit that let them shut most of the Colonial Fleet off remotely, they probably wouldn't have even attempted an attack. And that's where I think the biggest weakness of the 12 colonies lies. They really aren't great at countering espionage. They installed brand new software on all their ships without vetting it first to ensure that it didn't have compromised security, when their main existential threat was a race of computer people who had already demonstrated the ability to hack computer systems in their previous war. Another example, in the first season of the show, a Cylon device was allowed to sit in plain sight on Galactica's bridge, listening to everything going on for God knows how long, before anybody bothered to point it out. Other than that, though, the Colonial commanders seem competent enough, comparable, I'd say, to modern military personnel. They make mistakes, but they're also not prone to being morons, usually. Finally, the Cylons. In direct combat, Cylons are pretty basic tactically. Jump a base star somewhere, launch all your fighters, and then blast everything with missiles. On the ground, use Centurions to kill stuff. Pretty basic. Where they get interesting is in espionage. Cylons are freaking amazing at infiltration and cyber warfare. The number models blend into their spy roles so perfectly that they often have no idea they're actually Cylons. If they're able to interface their computers with anybody else's systems, they can rapidly take control of those systems. I should note that the number models are made of meat and don't seem to actually have the ability to directly interface with computers like their Centurions can. So they're way better at infiltration than their metallic brethren, but they're also not able to hack computer systems quite as easily. As I've mentioned in earlier sections, it's infiltration and cyber warfare that I believe are the biggest advantages of the Cylons, and it's an advantage that neither the Imperials nor the 12 colonies really have the ability to approach replicating. It's very unique to the Cylons. So there you go. My summary of the tactical tendencies and abilities of each faction. Let me know in the comments if I missed something or if I'm being too hard on the Imperials. I'm not, but feel free to debate me on this. But in the meantime, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you.